Okay, I'll confirm when we're live, okay?
Right.
Okay, Chairman, the live stream has commenced.
Thank you. Good morning. Firstly, to those watching the live stream, I apologise for the delayed start with a small IT issue, but we're all good to go now. I hope it stays that way. Welcome to this virtual meeting of Cornwall Council's Audit Committee. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is at last being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video. If the council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try to re-establish their connection. As I call members to speak, I will try to remember to remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the democratic officer will advise you. Votes will be taken by roll call and the result announced by the democratic services officer. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable peculiar interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. To confirm the procedure for today's meeting is that committee members who wish to speak on an item should indicate by typing X in the chat box. Thank you. Before we start today's business, I will now ask the Democratic Services Officer, Helen Snell, to confirm members and officers' attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can call upon each member to introduce themselves, please. Councillor Harris.
David Harris, Cornwall Councillor, Truro-Trehaven Division.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond.
Councillor Philip Desmond, Poole and Tahidi, Vice Chair, Audit Committee.
Thank you. And Councillor Edgerton.
Rob Edgerton, Probus, Tregony and Grandpound.
Thank you. And Councillor Ekin-Smith.
Good morning, David Ekin-Smith, Councillor for 11.
Thank you. And Councillor Jordan.
Yes, good morning, Barry Jordan, Councillor for the Untitled Division.
Thank you. And Councillor Kenny.
Good morning, Joanna Kenny, Newquay Pentire.
Thank you. And Councillor LeBroy.
Peter LeBroy, Bude.
Thank you. And Councillor Wood.
Councillor John Wood, Roach Division.
Thank you. And Councillor Ethel Gibbons.
Good morning, one and all. Mike Ethel Gibbons, Cabinet Member for Customers, representing Laddock, St Clements and St Owen.
Thank you. We also have a lay member, Chris Butters.
Good morning, Chris Butters, independent lay member. Good morning.
Thank you. And our external auditors, Grant Thornton representatives, Paul Dossett.
Paul Dossett, partner from Grant Thornton.
Thank you. And Jerry Daly.
Geraldine Daly, lead auditor for Cornwall, Grant Thornton.
Thank you. And then turning to our officers, Tracy Langley.
Morning, Tracy Langley, Chief Operating Officer and Section 151 Officer for Cornwall Council.
Thank you. And Holly Sykes.
Good morning, Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit.
Thank you. And Gary Walton.
Morning, Gary Walton, Principal Audit Manager, Internal Audit.
And Zoe Davies.
Good morning, I'm Zoe Davies, Principal Auditor and Risk Manager.
Thank you. And Jason Pengilly.
Good morning, Jason Pengilly, Fraud and Insurance Manager.
Thank you. And my name's Helen Snell, Democratic Officer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, carrying on with the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have two apologies today from Councillor Biscoe and our lay member, Jeff Ring.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest, please? I'll take silence as being a no. Right, item 3 on the agenda minutes of the meeting held on 31st of July, which are set out on pages 1, etc. If I just flick through them and ask for comments, page 1, page 2.
I've got an amendment, Chairman. It's Helen Snell, Democratic Services. The bottom of page 2 should read the draft annual governance statement for 2019/20 as set out in Appendix 1, comma, be approved, comma, to be signed by the leader and chief executive on behalf of the council.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Page 3, page 4, page 5.
Got another comment there, Chairman. It's Helen Snell, Democratic Services. Page 5, towards the bottom, item number 4 needs to read the need, comma, in future years, comma, for the audit committee to have had the time for an informal question and answer session.
Yep, that's fine. That makes sense. Page 6, page 7. If there are no other comments, can I ask somebody to propose that we approve the minutes?
I'll propose.
With those two amendments, those two small amendments we've just read out.
I'll propose subject to the amendments being added.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. And a seconder?
I'll second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Eakin-Smith. Okay, Helen, if you'll take the vote.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edgerton.
Abstain because I wasn't on the committee then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eakin-Smith.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
4.
Thank you. Councillor LeBroy.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wood. Councillor Wood.
Has he fallen off?
Councillor Wood. Sorry, Chairman, I can't see that Councillor Wood is here, but that is carried anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If we can move on to agenda item 4, external audit progress report. I presume Jerry Daly from Grant Thornton will be giving this to start with.
Chair, I will start. And then Jerry will pick up from the actual report. So just a couple of quick updates for councillors. Since the last audit committee, we have issued 2 public interest reports. One on Nottingham City Council in respect to the governance of their energy company, and one more recently, which the Section 151 officer I think has circulated to members on the London Borough of Croydon and its financial management issues. And so I just wanted to give councillors a sort of feel for what are the big issues of the day in the world of local government, and I think governance and financial management are absolutely those issues, and our report that Geraldine will take us through reflects some of those issues as they relate to Cornwall. I think it's very important that councillors perhaps read the Croydon report, because it's an accumulation of, in some cases, quite small things that led to their financial challenges, and an example of very much where the right advice needs to be taken and where councillors need to offer appropriate scrutiny and challenge to financial decisions. So hopefully that's good. I'll now hand over to Geraldine, who will take us through the Cornwall progress report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if you turn to page 15 in your pack, this is the summary of the progress so far in your financial statements audit for 1920. It was written as at the 8th of October, and things have continued to move on in terms of our work under value for money as well as the financial statements. So page 15 gives you an update on the areas that were in your audit plan valuation of property, plant and equipment, valuation of the pension liability, and the group accounting and associated disclosures are all areas that were in the audit plan that we wanted to focus on and have continued to focus on and test. And we're currently in the process of finalising our work on the valuation of property, plant and equipment, in particular concluding on the treatment of the wave hub and the valuation of the buildings that we transferred to Trevest. And just to note, those buildings are not material to the group account. And we're also still concluding and communicating regarding the group, particularly around going concern assumptions in relation to Cornwall Airport. And we will come back to you on the 18th of November with our audit findings report, concluding on the work for our financial statement. Going on to page 16, we've highlighted the value for money work that we've been undertaking. And again, just to confirm, there's been no changes to our audit plan. Our audit plan stated that we wanted to look at financial sustainability and medium-term financial planning. We wanted to look at the reaction, I guess, of the council to the impacts of COVID-19 and the arrangements that the council actually swiftly put in place to address that, and also the governance of Trevest Youth LLP. In terms of the Trevest LLP governance work, that has been concluded. So as at the time of writing this report, it hasn't been concluded. We presented our findings to the owners board last week and made a series of recommendations which management are now responding to. And again, members, you will see the outcome of that and management's responses to our recommendations in your audit findings report on the 18th of November. And there's a summary there on the work that we've done around COVID-19. I think at this stage we would say that there were sound arrangements in place, but obviously we will conclude on that on the 18th of November.
Jerry, can I just interrupt you? Can you get a bit closer to your phone? You're a bit faint.
Right. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So apologies, I'm using my phone, Chair. And then finally the work on financial sustainability, as Paul's just mentioned. Financial sustainability is absolutely crucial to local government. We've been saying this as a firm and as a team for a number of years, and you will see obviously the outcome of when that can become weak given the current releases of our PIRs. Just moving then on to what is ongoing in terms of the accounts, just an update on the valuation of land and buildings, and I've put these in because these are the significant areas that we concentrate on. So just to give members an update as at the 8th of October in terms of progress. I'm more than happy to take any questions before I then go on to the other section of our report, which is an update on the Redmond review. So you have the slides there. And actually, in relation to some of the work that we are currently doing in Cornwall, that's really quite relevant when we talk about the vast amount of work we do on valuations, pension liability, etc. And the need, I think, from Redmond to say that we need to focus more on the things that really, really do matter to the council: your finances, your financial sustainability and delivery of services. So, Chair, I'm more than happy to take any questions on the progress report.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Edgerton first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a very minor one. On page 15, you talk about valuations. One of the things is the Tamar Bridge. Now, I really cannot see the point of trying to value the Tamar Bridge. The value of something is what somebody would be prepared to buy it for. Now, we're not ever going to seriously contemplate selling the bridge, are we? Unless we were to propose a privatisation. We'll flog off the bridge to an operator who could then charge what he like on tolls and get a return. It just seems a complete waste of time and money for somebody to try and, you know, fantasise some value of that bridge, and I just don't see the point.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. I don't think we would disagree. I don't think we would disagree, and I think Paul may have a further comment on this. And again, this is very closely related to the work that Redmond did, which I'll come on to. We do spend a vast majority of our audit time on looking at the valuation of your property, plant and equipment, and of course you do have the odd bridge, the odd wave hub, and various other items within your asset base. And we do spend a lot of time on, for instance, the valuation of pension liability, neither of which make any difference to the bottom line in terms of your income and expenditure. So I will leave it there. I'm sure Paul will have another comment to make on that, and perhaps when I come to the Redmond review, you'll be able to see our response to his recommendations.
Right, thank you. Next, so Mr. Dossett, you want to make a comment now? Or?
Yeah, well, just very briefly, Chairman. Geraldine has highlighted the challenges that we have in terms of having to spend so much time on valuation. This is driven by the regulator's requirements. The regulator, the FRC, is very keen on asset valuations, primarily because the SIT for code requires a valuation process for all assets that's based largely on current valuation, fair valuation, depreciated replacement cost, etc. So even something as somewhat obtuse as the Tamar Bridge requires far more time spent by colleagues in the council and by ourselves on valuations. And I agree in totally that it's not a useful use of anyone's time or money, quite frankly, but it's the regulatory environment we are in, and obviously the Redmond review hopefully will address that particular challenge.
Right, thank you. Can we just note that to welcome Councillor Biscoe, who's joined us. Welcome, Bert. Next up with the question is Councillor Desmond, please.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Jerry and Paul.
Hi.
My question concerns valuations. If you can refer to page 22 of the papers, which is your report page 11, that's where you refer to the valuation of Cornwall Council's land and buildings as a significant risk. And I'd just like to ask an allied question concerning that in the context of the IFR 16 rules and the implications for the financial year 2021. Two questions, if I may. Bearing in mind the close proximity to the end of the 1920 financial year, are you becoming involved in overseeing and monitoring Cornwall Council's preparations for the IFRS 16 requirements for 2021 and the risk impact this may have on the Corsa group of companies, and in particular Cormac, who occupy some 500,000 square metres of land and buildings, excluding the airport and Castle and Dinas Quarry? The second part of the question is this: is this going to be a major scope of work during your audit duties to the council? Is this issue in your audit programme, and what actions have you put in place to ensure timely delivery? There's quite a bit in there, but if you could give me some answers to those two questions in principles, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Desmond. So the IFRS 16 for everybody on the call is related to a change in the way that you account for lease arrangements and who accounts for the lease on their particular balance sheet. Now, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, MHCLG decided that the implementation of IFRS 16 be deferred for local governments for 1920. If we think about the complexity of your balance sheet, for instance, we've already just discussed property, plant and equipment. You've got a lot of assets. There's a lot of people using the assets, for instance, and IFRS 16 is a big task for both the organisation and will be for the auditor next year. So the implementation was delayed until 2021. So Councillor Desmond, probably taking your second one first, absolutely will form part of our audit plan for 2021. We are completing the 1920 at the moment, and as soon as that is completed, we will continue to discuss with the finance team the arrangements that they're putting in place to, one, identify all leases, and two, value them and classify them correctly. In terms of your first question, the work is ongoing. The council are looking at this. As I just said now, it is a big task, and it will involve all the interested bodies, I guess, particularly as it's all around usage. Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything from a national perspective.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this is a complicated area in terms of IFRS 16 implications, because across the piece we have had in the run up to IFRS 16 some really complex issues coming out of a variety of councils, and it does require a lot of assessment and a lot of judgment and a lot of analysis of particular parts of the compliance with the standards. So as Geraldine said, this is going to be quite a big issue.
Right. So, Paul, do you mind if I interrupt you? I think we're getting slightly off track here. This is much more relevant when we come to looking at current year's audit plan rather than last year. So can I move on to Councillor LeBroy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a much simpler question. Jerry, in your opening piece, you mentioned the importance of ongoing financial sustainability for local authorities. And I just wonder what the auditor's view of single year spending review and local government settlements were.
I'll pick up that. In principle, local government would benefit hugely from a longer spending review, a 3-year spending review or longer, because that will give the opportunity to plan with a degree more certainty. Clearly, the government have taken the view that in the light of the COVID crisis, that's not possible for them to do that, and I don't understand the detail of why that is, but I can understand that they are obviously in a difficult position at the moment. So it is not helpful to local authorities to have a 1-year spending review, and ideally would have 3 years, but I suppose it just reflects the position of the country at the moment. But we know it's going to be 1 year, and we have to plan accordingly. But it's clearly not it's not the optimal outcome for local government, without a doubt.
Thank you. Next up is Chris Butters.
Thank you, Chairman. Jerry, a question about Newquay Airport and the going concern. That's presumably a question of whether Cornwall Council or Cormac are able to offer a letter of support that the auditors can utilise. But my question is different. My question is actually whether the auditors of Cormac get a letter of support each year about itself from Cornwall Council, because Cormac itself is not a going concern without the ongoing contracts from Cornwall Council. I recognise there is a mutual dependency, but it seems to be sort of splitting hairs a bit, picking out the airport from the rest of the group. So my question simply is, does Cornwall Council offer a support letter to the auditors of the group companies to show an ongoing commitment?
I mean, we've been liaising with the subsidiary auditor, Bishop Fleming, for quite a few months now to establish what kind of support is.
Jerry, can you talk again, please? Sorry, thank you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Lovely, thank you, yeah.
So our role in this is two things: to liaise with the subsidiary auditor, Bishop Fleming, to understand what assurances they've obtained to be able to give a clear opinion on the Cormac accounts, Corserve accounts, the airport's accounts as well. I think it's probably fair to say that given the challenges this year, that there are still those discussions going on in terms of the airport, but the council have been working quite hard to try and understand how much support would be needed for the airport and any of their other subsidiaries, including Cormac, in light of, for instance, COVID-19. And what I would probably say is probably refer to Tracy Langley, your Chief Operating Officer, to maybe give more details on that.
Tracy, are you with us?
Yes, Chair, I'm with you. So yes, just to reiterate what Jerry has said, and you're absolutely right. We do give letters of comfort. We are 100% owner of the business. There are a group of companies, and at different times, the viability of those companies can differ. The airport is a particular issue at the moment, as it is nationally. And we are working with our auditors and the group of companies and the group of companies auditors to work out a viable future. But we are 100% owner, and if you have a look at the last of the cabinet reports which referred to this, we did make it. We put some Plan B arrangements in place in order to ensure that the airport had enough cash to keep open.
Right, thank you. I mean, so the question I've got for you, Jerry, is a very simple question. Are the accounts, annual government statements, bank money statements, etc., are they all going to be ready for our next meeting?
The audit findings report will be ready for the next meeting, Chair. We're still completing work on the PPE. We will still have to obviously go through our own quality standards regime within the internal audit, and I've itemised obviously the items there that we are still working on, but yes, they'll be ready. We'll be ready for the 18th of November.
Excellent. And presume we just touched on this, because I know that the Corserve and Cornwall Airport Limited accounts aren't yet signed. Is that going to delay your signing our accounts?
I mean, it's yeah, I believe it would delay it. It's obviously something that Paul's very mindful of at the moment. We are still, as Tracy's just said, we are still discussing the impact of the fact that they are unsigned, both Corserve and the airport, in terms of the opinion for our group. And it's probably quite important just to note that actually one of the things we do focus on is going concern, and you'll see a lot of commentary on that in the audit findings report. And this item is still outstanding as of now, but we continue to obviously discuss this with all the parties involved.
All right, thank you. If there's no more questions, did you want to talk about Redmond as well slightly? I mean, it's on our agenda, I think, for January as well. I think, isn't it, Helen?
Hi, David. Yes, it's going to be on the agenda for the January training event that we've got. So Jerry will be joining us for that as well. So you'll get a perspective of Redmond from both external audit, but also from the council.
Thank you. All right. So Jerry, if you can just speak to tell us something about the Redmond report, would be helpful.
Okay, will do, Chair. So our slides start on page 48. Just picking up on the outcome of the Redmond review. Publication was the 8th of September. I think you'll all relate to some of the things that are mentioned on page 50. Accounts for local government have become very complex, over 200 pages long. You have got, and other local authorities have got, quite innovative, unusual transactions and schemes that regulators tend to focus on. It does talk about things like the sign-off date. You'll recall that last year that was set to the 31st of July. And just talking about generally what kind of service authorities are getting from the auditors based on the fact that the difficult regulation regime that we work in. So he picked up on all of those and also did a consultation with local governments, with the firms and GP. They've got the statement at the end of those slides. And the outcome is that there will be changes to the way that local government is audited. There will be changes to the items that we will focus on. So we may not have a similar conversation as we had today in 3 years' time about the valuation of the Tamar Bridge or your HRA assets, etc. We are more likely, and a good idea, a good way forward is we are more likely to focus on the financial sustainability of the council, things we've just been talking about, going concern, medium-term financial planning, and how you are sustainable in the future. So there is going to be a concerted move away from focusing on some of those things within your account that don't affect the bottom line, and more resourcing put in by the firms to concentrate on the things that we believe matter to both yourselves and the residents of Cornwall. And as I said, on page 63, you'll see the commentary from Grant Thornton in relation to that. So I'm sure Paul and I are happy to take any questions that you have at this stage, albeit I appreciate we are going to do some training on this in the new year.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments. Anybody else have any comments on this? I mean, the two comments I would make, as you're very much picking up on your report, is it looks like our fees are going to increase. I don't expect to comment on that. There's an interesting comment in here on page 58, which is about the ability of audit committees, etc. You know, we do very well. We've got 2 good lay members. I'm laying this down as a marker for the future. The amount we pay our lay members and ask them to do is totally out of kilter. We pay our lay members something like, it's a public figure, I believe, and if it isn't, I apologise, about £1,400 a year for what turned out to be 6 meetings, you know, 6 days of preparing for meetings, etc. You know, and we are blessed with who we have. But if you compare it to what a non-executive director of a company like Corserve gets, which is about £16,000 a year, if we want to keep decently lay members, this is something I believe we will need to look at in the future. Councillor Biscoe's put his hand up. Bert, we're putting costs in the box, but I see you. I hear you.
Sorry, yes, Chairman. Sorry, I'm sorry to be late to the meeting, but here I am. I would just say that I take the point that you make entirely, but I would remind you of comments that were made by Councillor Rand in the council chamber about payments that are made to non-executive directors of council companies appointed by the council, which is in serious need of urgent review. I think, particularly in relation to the figures that you have just quoted.
It's not for this meeting, but I have a lot of, I'm grateful to you for raising it, and a lot of sympathy for his comments.
Chairman, if I just pick up your 2 questions, because I think they're good questions. I think on audit fees, I mean, Redmond has recognised the market challenge in terms of the engagement of the larger firms in this market, and the fees is part of that. But also, if we get to the place that Geraldine described in terms of refocusing the audit, in due course, when the Office for Audit Regulation comes into play with a refocused audit process, then we may be able to spend less time on some of those areas, such as the Tamar Bridge, etc., and that might help with the fee position going forward. I think in terms of members, what Redmond was very, very keen to be concerned about, or to flag, was that as local government accounts become more complicated, as financial transactions become more complicated, as Byzantine group structures, as in the Croydon Public Interest Report, are developed, members need to be kept up to date with the changes in financial governance and financial sustainability arrangements in councils, so that they are well placed in audit committees and indeed in other committees to ask those challenging and searching questions that is needed. My personal view is that this particular committee is more robust and more challenging than some of the others that we work with, and that's a really good thing. But clearly Redmond's looking at the quality of audit committees across the piece, and therefore we do see in many other places a very cursory level of challenge and scrutiny, which is what Redmond was aiming at. So hopefully, again, with the right support, we can lift the standard across the sector.
Right, thank you. On behalf of the committee, we will accept the compliment. Thank you. In that case, we've got a recommendation, which is a bit bizarre, that the committee considers the external audit update and raise any issues, questions or areas for clarification with the council's external auditors as appropriate. Well, we've done that, so I think the recommendation as such should just be the committee notes the external audit update, full stop. And if we're happy with that, if somebody would propose that. That was Councillor Kenny, thank you. And a seconder? Somewhere?
I'm happy to, David.
Thank you, Councillor Edgerton. So the resolution is that the committee notes the external audit update. Helen Snell, if you take the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're voting for, against or abstain. Councillor Harris?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edgerton?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ecclesmith?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan?
For.
Councillor Kenny?
For.
Thank you. Councillor LeBroy?
For.
And Councillor Wood?
For.
Thank you.
Councillor Biscoe for as well. I think he's still on the committee, isn't he?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Biscoe. Because you gave your apologies, you're not.
No. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, no. Councillor Biscoe.
For Helen.
Thank you. That's carried. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we move on to agenda item 5, internal audit performance and progress report? Holly Sykes, I guess you're going to do this for us.
Yes, will do. Good morning, Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit. So referring to the report, Internal Audit Performance and Progress Report, pages 65 to 73. This report provides the committee with an update on the progress of the internal audit plan. This is provided to you every 6 months to ensure you remain aware of the audit work that has been done. This report also updates you on the performance of the internal audit service in respect of delivery. So in respect of that delivery, the audit team are on target and in line with our profile and the years gone previous. We work very hard to ensure we work in the most efficient and effective ways to deliver the programme. This, however, has been an exceptional year for us, and internal audit has sought to be agile and provide the appropriate assurance to the council in these unprecedented times. This has meant constantly reviewing the programme to enable us to deliver urgent and new work, especially in respect of COVID-19. The new audit work is provided on pages 70 and 71 of this report, as well as information regarding audits that will not be undertaken, with the context to support these changes. Much of the COVID work is then summed up in agenda item 6. On page 73 of the report are the opinions of work undertaken. As you are aware, protocol is that high risk and limited or no assurance opinions come to the audit committee. I've had 2 further limited opinions this year, IS software licensing and debt management, both with a medium risk opinion. For debt management, there were a number of gaps in terms of the effectiveness of the control framework in place for the appropriate administration of debt management operations. There was no debt management policy in place, and inflexibilities were found in debt collection strategies. The direction of travel is now more positive, with new policies and procedures being drafted. There is an acknowledgement that the responsibility, accountability and authority with regard to debt collection needs to be reviewed, and management reporting to services and directorates of their debt profile needs to be more robust. For software licensing, there were controls in place over the procurement of software and management of licenses, which generally ensure the terms and conditions associated with vendor licensing agreements are met. However, the overall software asset management framework was found to be basic in nature and reliant on manual oversight. The framework was not at the level of maturity expected for a large and complex organisation such as Cornwall Council. Agreed management actions are in place for both these audits, where the council directors team have oversight and monitor the progress. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? We have no. Sorry, Councillor Edgerton, I think you were first just.
Right, thank you. It was on page 73 where it's the risks, and you've got COVID small business grant fund in retail, leisure grant, high risk. What is that risk exactly? Because I thought, you know, from the council point of view, we did extremely well in getting all the money out of the door. and yes, we've got money left in the pot, which we probably have to give back to the government. But you know, where's the risk on it? Is it that some of them may have gone to the wrong people? That do we fear that there might have been mistakes made, or what was the risk?
So in my next update, we'll go more into the detail regarding the COVID work. However, the risk is around the complexity and the nature of the urgency of the situation. You know, it was dealing with it in a quick manner. It was a lot of money going to a lot of different places. So that's the nature of the risk. But it was operating efficiently.
Oh, right. Okay.
John Kenny, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you. Oh, damn it. Pressed the wrong button. Sorry, apologies. Yes, Holly, when you talk about debt management, I assume there's been a change because of the COVID stuff, because we are likely to get a lot more debts and we have to deal with this very, very sensitively. So I don't know if it's made any difference to your work.
So absolutely, that was taken into consideration, and the policy around debt management was amended during the COVID period. So yeah, that obviously formed part of the audit and was taken into consideration in the field work, but put COVID to one side, there was definitely still an issue in regards to debt management. And it's obviously then been enhanced by going through the COVID process and not collecting debt in quite the same way during that time.
I think it makes it even more important that we do have a proper policy there.
Absolutely, and it was appropriate that we amended the policy during the COVID time, being sensitive to the residents. So yes, all taken into consideration.
Chair, if I may raise one simple question.
Yes.
Do you have an estimate for fraud?
In regards to
the grants paid out?
So I think probably, Councillor Desmond, that might be a question for the next agenda item when we're going to go through all the COVID work. Is that okay?
Yes, please. Don't forget my question.
Right.
So can I come up, if nobody else has a point? You put town deal risk and town deal governance on your list of audit reviews to be done. So that's going to go on to the audit plan, I assume, as well.
Yes, so that work is underway at the moment.
Good. Because I mean, I think, you know, as I understand it, Cornwall Council is the accountable body for these £25 million per town maximum grants coming into four councils. So I would have thought, you know, it should be earlier on your audit plan, in particular the governance of these things as they develop. And if I don't know if it's me to say it or you to agree it, if we could perhaps bring that back to our March meeting for a report specifically.
So we have done sort of we're doing a phased approach to this work, given that it is a project and it's going to be changing over time. So we're doing phase one, which is looking at the early governance arrangements, and then when things have settled down and those boards are working fully and we get an understanding of where it's going, we'll then go back in and do some more work. So it will form part of our annual opinion updates. So you'll get an update via that mechanism.
Okay, so
depending on the assurance opinion. So if it comes out as limited and high, of course you'll get an update as per the protocol.
Right. Okay. But can we have something back in March? I mean, these are big chunks of money being handled by I would say cobbled together is one expression. You know, put together boards of people. So I think given we're the accountable body for up to £100 million, I think it would be good to have something coming back in March, giving us some comfort that the governance is decent.
Well, it can form part of our summary updates. So yeah.
Thank you. That's fine. Okay. Are there any other points on this part of the agenda? No. Good. If not, we have a resolution. The recommendations are that the committee notes the performance and progress of internal audit against the 2021 audit programme, and the committee notes the outcome of the completed internal audit and takes assurance from the work for the period ending September 20. Can we have a proposer, please?
I propose. Councillor Desmond.
Councillor Desmond, and a seconder. Councillor Kenny.
Oh.
Sorry, you're a bit slow, Barry. Okay, Helen, if you can take the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Harris.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Biscoe.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Egerton.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ecclesmith.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
4.
Thank you. Councillor LeBroy.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Wood.
4.
Thank you. That's carried, Chairman.
Did we get Councillor Biscoe then?
Yes.
Well done. Thank you.
Councillor Biscoe has been got, Chairman.
Is that got or shot? Agenda item 6, internal audit exception report and agreed management actions. And I suggest that when we've dealt with this item, we take a 5-minute break. So is this you again, Holly, to lead on this one, please?
It is, yes, it is. So Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit. This report can be found on pages 74 to 88. This report provides an overview of a joint piece of work undertaken between my team and CIPFA in regards to pension contributions, an update on the COVID-19 audit and fraud work, and an update on the agreed management actions. From page 79, I provided information in respect of this pensions contribution review, and will take it that this has been read. As part of this update today, Patrick Weir, the Head of Business Operations, will follow my update with a summary of the work underway to tackle the issues raised. However, to summarise, the Cornwall Council pension policy is fit for purpose. However, it was found to not be operating correctly as no profiling of temporary increases in remuneration was being undertaken. This resulted in some employees being automatically moved onto a higher contribution rate for the month in which temporary pay increases were received. And as a result, in that month, they were being overcharged in terms of their pension contribution. This has been happening since 2014, but until a formal request for review from an employee was received by the head of legal, it was not known about beyond individual occurrences dealt with by payroll administrators. Once this was escalated, the Section 151 and Chief Executive commissioned this piece of work as an urgent request to ensure the situation could be remedied. Internal Audit has undertaken a sampling exercise on potentially overpaid contributions in 2019-20 to try and establish the extent of the problem. Based on the sample, Internal Audit estimates that 565 people in that year may have overpaid their pension contributions, with the total of overpayments being in the region of £30,000. Further work will be undertaken by the payroll team to understand the impact from 2014. Following on from this piece of work, Internal Audit have also been requested to undertake further work to review the standard operating procedures across the council. Chairman, Patrick Weir is on the call as well, so am I able to hand over to him to give an update on what is being done in regards to this?
Yes, please, if you would. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Holly, for the introduction. So I'll just give some commentary on the actions that are specified in the report. First thing to say is that these follow the recommendations that were made by CIPFA as a result of the work that Holly's outlined. So I'll just go through them in order with your permission, Chair. So in terms of Action 1, the Oracle system has been amended to ensure that the calculation process for pension contributions has been corrected, so that action is complete. Action 2 is about informing other employers, again that who use the council's payrolls, again that action complete. The information to employees about appealing against their pension contribution banding is in progress, but will be taken forward so that employees have that information. As for Action 4, a record of appeals against contribution bandings will be kept. Action 5 concerns the accuracy of our payroll system, and the Oracle Cloud processing system will automate the controls around how pension contributions are handled, relates to Action 1. And in relation to Action 6, again, this is in hand and progressing. Fundamentally, we believe the council has a sound payroll system via Oracle Cloud, and I'll come on to controls in a second. Actions 7 to 9 are taken together, and this is about consideration to the historic issue relating to contributions going back to 2014. Holly gave an indication of what the scale of that might be in 1 year, and we will be analysing payrolls going back to 2014 to identify individuals affected and the sums involved and arranging for their refund. The principle here is, although the amounts are small, clearly it's inaccurate and needs to be put right. And that work is progressing. There's an initial work on a report from Oracle Cloud to give a sense of the scale of that work going back to 2014. But our intention is that that is concluded by 31st of March 2021, i.e. that people will have had back any money that was overpaid. Actions 10, 11 and 12, again, I'll take those together. These relate to the communications. Trade union colleagues have been advised, and staff communications about this issue were sent on the 16th of October. And then finally, Chair, just in those actions relate to the SIPFA recommendations. In addition to those, as Holly mentioned, we're working on strengthening our core operating procedures, because a key question for this issue is why it wasn't picked up sooner. And there's a number of factors there that will have influenced that, and we're making sure that our monthly payroll reconciliations are adjusted to ensure that sums like this are picked up on a regular basis, so we can pick up issues like this sooner, and that work is ongoing, Chair. So I'll leave it there in terms of commentary, and very happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'm going to abuse my position and go first, if I may, and if I can't, it's tough. I'm doing it. You say right at the end of this report, overpayments will be recouped from the pension fund. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. Yes. Right. Yeah, that's where the money has ended up. Yeah.
That's question one. Clearly, from what you're saying, people had queried had raised a question about paying too much in pension contributions before the incident in March 2020. So my problem is they queried it, it was corrected, therefore a payment was made back to somebody which had to be authorised. So why did nobody ever flag it and say, whoops, have we got a problem here?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's a number of factors there. So not everybody would have queried it because of the small amounts of money involved, and the sporadic nature in which those issues were raised in that period meant that it was and dealt with by relatively junior members of either the HR or payroll teams. That a pattern didn't emerge in that period of time, so it wasn't picked up as a result of there being an ongoing issue identified. The other part that we have looked at in relation to this is there are the small sums involved would typically be picked up in payroll controls relating to the gross to net calculation, and again, because the numbers were so small, they didn't get picked up by that. And again, the monthly reconciliations of payrolls would particularly look at, the monthly routine would look at payments in excess of about 3,000, and these would slip under that threshold. So all of those factors would add up to a situation where a pattern didn't emerge, and where issues were highlighted and dealt with, that they were regarded as resolved rather than an indication of a wider issue, which clearly the March report did indicate there was a wider issue.
I think my point is that nobody thought to go, whoops, have we got a problem with the system? That's just a straightforward statement of fact, I think. Can I just make one thing clear here? Because Councillor Holly, who chairs the Pensions Committee, raised this. There is no criticism in here of the pensions admin team whatsoever, is there? They've been doing their job quite normally.
That's correct, Chair. No.
Thank you. I just wanted to get that on record. Right. Okay. If I can go on to hands up, and I think Councillor Kenny is the first.
This is a very, very basic question. When you talk about temporary increases into payroll, what are we talking about? Overtime or what? What are these temporary increases?
Yeah, it could be overtime. It could be arrears of pay if a pay award is paid retrospectively. There haven't been many of those since 2014. Most of the pay awards have been acted upon in the time they were due. It might also be instances where officers are undertaking additional duties and are financially recognised for that.
Thanks.
Right, Chris Butters.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst the sums involved are quite small, the number of people impacted is quite significant. So this feels like a fairly large failure of process and system. But the action and the report doesn't mention anywhere anything about accountability or responsibility. This does feel like something that has the potential to irritate a lot of people, and yet the post-mortem is entirely forward-looking with no retrospective recognition that somewhere in this there is a failure. And I wonder if there's a bit of a shrug going on rather than taking active responsibility to untangle this. And what particularly highlighted itself to me was that paragraph 5 says that other councils have already changed Oracle because of this issue. So it feels like there is a knowledge at, as you say, a junior level that there has been errors made that's not been picked up on, and other councils have picked up on this, but we haven't identified it or followed through on it ourselves. So it feels to me like not only is there a process problem, but there's an accountability problem. Thank you.
I'm not sure your comments need answering as such, Chris. I think they're almost mirroring mine, unless you want to say something, Patrick, specifically.
Not specifically, Chair. I think the accountability bit is, from my perspective, as soon as this issue has arisen, we have taken the action to sort it and to put it right for those employees affected. But really, I don't think I've got anything to add to that, Chair.
Right, thank you. Councillor Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. I think Chris Butter does make a reasonable point about accountability and sanction. At least one in your position ought to be a little bit embarrassed about the situation. But let's move on from that. I'd like to ask you a question about other employers. On page 80, under paragraph 11, it refers to the council providing payroll services for a number of other employers. Have you undertaken to inform those other employees of the problem? And if that's being done, are you accounting for any risk of a potential formal complaint, maybe for a compensation claim of some sort?
Through you, Chair. So my understanding is that action has been taken, not by me personally. There was a correction, actually. Holly introduced me as head of business operations. That's my colleague, Abby Cockings. I'm head of people and workforce. So it's Abby has been undertaking those actions as head of business operations to let other employers know. I'm not aware of their response to that yet, Councillor Desmond, but we will obviously deal with any representations they make in that regard.
Who are these employers?
Well, I think from knowledge, we sell payroll services to certainly to the group of companies and to schools and other public sector employers. I think it's about 30 people who will buy into our payroll services.
30 organisations?
That's correct.
So the total number of people involved in this could be huge.
Well, it could. I'm going back to Holly's comments about the first year analysis that the audit team undertook. Identified about 500 people across the year, and our payroll just for the council will be 5,500 people. So the numbers need to be seen in that perspective. But that's not to downplay at all Councillor Butter's comments and your own relating to the number of people this will affect. Our view is that the average overpayment will be about £50, but there is obviously a range of amounts.
Just to be clear, all the employers we provide payroll services for have been informed of this, and we are now doing a review of all those employers.
That's correct, and it relates only to those employers who will be making contributions to the local government pension scheme. So it's an important distinction.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Chairman. There is nothing in here about previous employees, and we've had quite a few previous employees who've worked for the council, or perhaps now other companies within the group of companies that have left. What have you done to ensure that they haven't been overcharged or repay them?
It's a really good point, Councillor Jordan. So the review work that is being undertaken to analyse the payrolls going back to 2014 will identify people who have left, and we'll be making all reasonable attempts to contact them to refund any overpayments that they've made.
Thank you.
Councillor Biscoe.
Mr. Jordan's just asked my question. Thank you, Chairman.
Excellent. I'm glad to see you're all thinking the same way. Okay, that was Councillor Langley. I apologise. Tracy Langley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Patrick and Holly. I just wanted to reassure councillors that I take this really seriously, and I do see it as a failure of operating standards. And just so that so that I can put it into context for you with regards to what I am doing as a result of this, and it's rather linked to standard operating procedures across the whole organisation, which is and linked to our transformation work around doing things right the first time. So I am personally looking at the work that Patrick and his team are doing to put this right, so that I get an update every week. And the second thing is that you will see from Holly's plan in internal audit that we are really concentrating on standard operating procedures and compliance with standard operating procedures over the next few months, just to reassure you.
Thank you. Councillor Biscoe again.
So I thought of another question, Chairman. I'm sorry about that. I just wondered, and this may be a question for Tracy, really, I think. Do you feel that the oversight here, which has led to this, is a symptom of the people of the department that's dealing with this being under-resourced?
I think less so, Councillor Biscoe. I think it is a matter of having a set of standard operating procedures that people are looking at and making sure that they're complying with. So it's a matter of management oversight and compliance.
We have heard in another context this morning that often we've got the systems, but we haven't got the people to operate them. And that's really what I'm driving at, that it's one thing to have the systems in place and another thing to have the capacity to be able to exercise them properly. And I just want some assurance on that, I think.
Yeah, I don't disagree with your analysis. However, I would like to think that all managers with oversight of these types of transactions understand what the procedures are and are complying with it. And in this instance, our policy and our procedures were right. It was just that we weren't operating them, and it is kind of management oversight to ensure that we are operating them properly. So in the first instance, that is where we will look.
Okay. Thank
To
you.
which I would comment, a manager can only manage with the resources a manager's got.
We can go on for a long time on this one.
We can, and a lot of this is about understanding what are the performance metrics, and I think that if you have a look at the performance metrics, those are not good enough, and that is something that we're concentrating on.
Okay. Councillor Edison, the last one on this piece before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is that we have actually identified the problem and we're sorting it out, and we've put our hands up to admit that we made a mistake. I would have thought realistically from the employee's point of view, you know, there's quite a large number with a small sum of money for each, but I would think most of them would actually say, oh, thank you very much. If somebody writes to you and says, we've made a mistake, we've overcharged you by £50, please find enclosed our cheque for £50 and sorry about that. Actually, I think most of those employees will say, oh, that's quite nice, I can have a drink this weekend. So I'm not downplaying, you know, the fact that we made a mistake, but we have at least put our hands up, we've admitted it, and we are putting it right, and lessons have been learned. So, you know, I think overall, you know, nobody's died. So, you know, let's just learn the lessons and move on.
Move on. Okay. Right. Sorry. Holly, do you want to come back with the COVID-19 update, please?
Yes, certainly. Okay, so the report then goes on to outline all the work undertaken by the audit and fraud team in respect of COVID-19. The Council's internal audit and counter-fraud team have responded to COVID-19 on a number of fronts using agile auditing techniques and data analytics. Specific audit work has been undertaken during the pandemic period, ensuring that the audit coverage has reflected the prevailing risks. Over the last 6 months, the internal audit team has worked closely with other local authority internal audit teams to ensure work was addressing the nationally recognised and common risks. These reviews are outlined in the report. A further review is planned to deliver a post-COVID-19 audit, looking at the Council's response in totality to the pandemic. If you've got any specific questions, Gary Walton, the Principal Audit Manager, and Jason Pengilly, the Insurance and Fraud Manager, are in attendance. Any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Sadly, I'm not sure the date of post-COVID is accurate. So I think it's going to be a mid-COVID review, isn't it? Rather than
I think you're right.
Are you going to delay the review, or are you going to do it anyway? That's the sensible question.
Yes, so we will do it anyway, and so it will end up being a number of parts. So we will deliver one bit and then hopefully be able to do a proper post review. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Councillor Desmond.
And my premature question, I'll repeat it again if I may. The council did a very good job of getting the money out of the door to the small businesses and the leisure industry at the start of our COVID crisis. But inevitably, there will be fraud implications. I know a couple of instances where, I won't go into detail, but I do know of a couple of instances which stand tall as fraud. And I just wondered if you guys had achieved any sort of estimate of what you think the level of fraud might be. You've got a national scale, but I'm just wondering if we are aware today of what the nature of the problem might be and what it might be later on. It's a high risk issue.
So am I able to bring Jason Pengilly, the fraud manager, in on that?
Good morning, Jason Pengilly, Fraud and Insurance Manager. So with obviously the grants as they were, the emphasis on government was to pay now, check later, for obvious reasons and understandable reasons. So what we did within the fraud teams, we engaged through the National Fraud Initiative, where they very quickly pulled some work together, or a data match together, where we could send off the grants that we'd paid for checking, and within the detail of the report on page, bear with me, 85. On the third paragraph down, all the matches were given risk scores, and they were combined scores. It was quite a complex scoring matrix on how they did it. And in all honesty, I probably don't have the time to go into it in any huge detail now. But effectively, there were a number of cases that came out with combined scores 6s or 7s, which were the high risk cases. Of those, there were in excess of 500, so 541 of those cases which we reviewed. Of those reviews, we established there were 6 where the grants were incorrectly claimed and recovery action has been instigated on those. And of the total 541, there were still, at the time of writing the report, at the end of September, there were still 10 in progress and still under investigation. So if you look at those figures in sort of that sort of terms, there were 16 of over 540 cases reviewed. Now you have to bear in mind that at the time this was done, there were nearly 20,000 grants paid. So in terms of the risk and exposure to fraud, it is actually quite minimal. And if I'm going to be honest, it's actually incomparable to what potentially would be the guidelines for risks of fraud and exposure of between 2 and 7%. So, you know, of the work we did, you know, 540 were reviewed, and as I said, we only identified 16 now. Of those 16, to say that they were actually fraudulently claimed at this stage would be difficult to suggest, because it could be that actually they were just inappropriately claimed. So somebody thought they were entitled to the grant and they weren't, and that recovery action's taken place, as opposed to what could be considered fraudulent, where somebody's produced false information to make the claim, which are two very different things. So in terms of the fraud risk and exposure, it is quite low and comparable to the level of claims that we've paid out. Does that answer your question, Councillor Desmond?
Yeah, thank you. From what you've just said, I would estimate, therefore, you've got say 3% of the grants that are being allocated which might have a question over their legitimacy. Is that a fair assumption?
Potentially, but obviously where there could be, so when these matches were done, the data was matched against two different criteria. So one was about an active bank account and one was about an active company. So there were two different matches, and that's where where I'm saying the combined scores, to explain in detail how that's worked, is quite complex, because it was matched against two different data sets, which gave you a combined score. So as an example, as it says in the report, where it's got a combined score of 1, it basically said you don't need to check these, the grants have been correctly paid. So but as I said, it just depends on how you look at the combined checks that were made. As I say, one was against live bank accounts, one was against live companies, so there were two different matches that then combined together. So yeah, it is a small risk, but in order to say to you, is it 3%, I couldn't honestly give you that statement, bearing in mind we'd issued 20,000 plus grants, and we've only reviewed a small proportion of them, as we were expected to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else on this one?
Chair,
Right.
John Wood is apologising.
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you. Agreed management actions, Holly, anything to say on there?
Provided the updates within the report, if there are any specific questions, happy to answer them, but nothing to really highlight at this point. I think the whole process of the agreed management actions is getting much the we were to reflect back 12-18 months ago, we would be looking at something quite different. So it's the council are really maturing in how they are concentrating on their agreed management actions, and also given that COVID-19 has obviously got in the way of a lot of normal business, I'm really encouraged by the work of the council in respect of the AMAs.
So to paraphrase that, the jumping up and down we did 12-18 months ago has had an effect.
Absolutely. And the council directors team look at them at every assurance meeting, so that's quarterly as well. So there's lots of interest, rightly so.
Good, thank you. Right. Any questions on that? Otherwise, we can move to recommendations. Right, we have 3 recommendations. Do I need to actually read them out? Nobody telling me I need to read them out. Note the outcome of the independent review of pensions Notes the work of the audit team in response to COVID-19 and notes the progress being made by management in implementing agreed management actions.
I'll propose, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. And the seconder?
I'll second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Eaton-Smith. Right, if you go to the vote, Helen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Harris?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Biscoe? Councillor Biscoe? Councillor Biscoe, you're on mute. We'll come back to Councillor Biscoe. Councillor Desmond?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edgerton?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ekin-Smith?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan?
For.
Councillor Kenny?
For.
And Councillor LeBroy?
For.
Councillor Biscoe? Councillor Biscoe, you're on mute. Okay, Councillor Biscoe must have dropped out. So that's carried, Chairman.
Thank you. All right. As I said, if it's now, according to my computer, 11:29, call it 11:30. Would a 5-minute break be sufficient, I suggest? In which case, if you would at least turn your cameras off and we'll be back in, and your microphone, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, by my reckoning, that's our 5 minutes up. Are we all back? There's nobody back.
I'm back.
We're back.
Okay. If we can carry on. Agenda item 7, strategic risks update. Is this you again, Holly?
It is. I'll introduce the risk manager, so I'll start it off. So Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit and Risk, pointing you to the report pages 89 to 107. The committee is provided with an overview of the strategic risks. These are in a revised format where you are provided with the key risk information and the mitigations that are being undertaken to reduce the likelihood and impact of the risk. The report also provides an overview of the COVID-19 risks and work undertaken in this area and progress being made to embed risk management across the council. Zoe Davies, the council risk manager, is in attendance to provide a more detailed overview. Over to you, Zoe.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear and see me? That's great. The Audit Committee has a role in terms of risk management in 2 key aspects, really. Firstly, they're in obtaining assurance that risk management arrangements are embedded at the council, and also to make sure that the council is managing its most critical risks. So this report aims to cover off 2 of those kind of key assurance areas, really. If I deal with strategic and the COVID strategic risks first, and then go on to perhaps talk about progress made with embedding risk arrangements throughout the organisation. You'll note that the council, as of June, has identified 7 new strategic risks that have been refreshed, refocused and rescored. In Appendix 1 to this report, it gives details of each of those strategic risks that are owned by a strategic director, the scores, current scores for those risks, and whether they have changed since Q1, a narrative in terms of the progress that risk owner has made in delivering mitigations to reduce the risk to its target score, and some bullet points which show you the types of mitigations that they intend to carry out. I would like to note that although some of the risk change scores may not have changed in Q1, these are really big strategic risks for the council, which don't have kind of sort of quick win solutions. So a lot of the mitigations involve planning, projects, delivery of policy, and driving sort of significant pieces of work through. So you would imagine that there is quite a lot of time and investment needed in order to drive some of these scores down. So I don't know if you have any questions with regards to those suite of strategic risks that myself, Holly, or perhaps Tracy would be able to answer.
Thank you. Right, I've got a few questions, but I'll let others go first. Questions? Chris Butters, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see that you've done an awful lot of work on processes and projects that are mitigants, and therefore you've gone through your scoring matrix to apply the mitigations against those scores. So at a granular level, I can see that there is a lot of work done to try and reduce some of these strategic risks. But looking at things like financial sustainability, in our current environment, you may have applied your mitigations, but I just can't see how risk has gone down. Surely at a strategic level, we're living in an environment that is more unpredictable and possibly more expensive than ever before. So whilst your mitigations, I'm sure, have value, I can't see how the overall score has gone down. And the same sort of applies to the second one, tension across priorities. I can't see in reality how the scoring has gone down from very high risk to medium risk. It just feels that no matter how many mitigations you put in place at the moment, risks are not reducing. So sorry if that's a bit negative, because there's a huge amount of work being done. But the reality is that the world is moving against us very quickly, and your mitigations have relevance, but I'm not sure they actually bring down the overall strategic risks.
But Zoe, do you want to answer that, or does Tracy Langley want to come in? Tracy's put her hand up very quickly. Well done.
Thank you. I mean, that's a really good question, and I think I would start with relativity. When we are trying to think about risk and risk mitigants, it is always in the context of what's happening right now. And actually, a lot of these risks aren't risks at all because they're actually happening. So they're events as opposed to risks. So it all starts getting very complicated. But let me try and answer how I have assessed that our risks have reduced in the scoring. So there is no doubt it's still really risky, and our financial sustainability depends on us being certain about future resources and certain about the levers that we use in order to control the resources that we have and any overspends and any increased pressures that we have. So I believe that with a combination of our councillors' help and with my senior colleagues' help, we have put in place lots of mitigation for in-year pressure, and I believe that we're working really hard in order to mitigate that. So our in-year pressures, I believe, are being managed, and I can see some of that, some of the implication of our actions starting to bite. So I can see that, you know, if we put the brakes on some of our expenditure, we will stop spending, and that will help our financial sustainability in year. Actually, my issue is much more about next year and future years, and that is about we don't really understand what pressures are building now that will impact and will continue to be pressures in future years. So let me give you an example of that, which is we have been funded to take people off of the streets, our off sleepers, and our people who are sort of sofa surfing. However, in the future, it is likely that we will have to continue to do that. Now, that is creating a pressure on our budget that we will have to try to resolve. So it's those kinds of pressures that are building that we still really don't understand what the impact of that is, matched against the uncertainty of the resources that we're going to get in for the future. Now, some of that is we can't control. We have no control over that, and that's why it's uncertain. It's uncertain. However, I am sure that because of the way that we're mitigating our pressures and the techniques that we are using in order to reduce our spending, the actual financial risk and our ability to be sustainable has reduced. It has increased, and therefore the risk is reduced on the score. So it's quite a complex mix of things, and it is high risk. But I think relative to others in the sector, we are less of a risk.
Thank you, Tracy. Chris, do you want to come back with a follow-up, or you?
I think I sort of feel I need to repeat my question. This risk analysis is not in comparison to other people. It's your own internal risks.
Yep.
And I just think you explained yourself why the risks haven't gone down. You're clearly managing events, and you're managing the known knowns and trying to manage the known unknowns, but the unknown unknowns are getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. And I think it's really dangerous to say that financial stability is improving, because it may be in the short horizon, but in the long horizon, I'm just not sure it is. And by pushing down risk now, you're at risk of saying in 3 months' time, actually, the risks have gone up again because some of the unknowns have crystallized.
Yeah,
I
agree.
The wave of unknown unknowns out there is so much bigger than it used to be, that to take perhaps a short-term view to the success of the mitigations is itself building your own risk of having to admit that things have overcome us in future. So I'm not sure there's a question there, but there's certainly a statement about the horizon and how far forward we should be looking in terms of risk management and planning.
I think, sorry, Chris, if I can just comment, I think the other point here is the other big risk in here is economic shocks. It is still marked as 5 times 5, 25, and note has been totally out of our control. So overall, we are still recognising the smelly stuff. To find the right word there. Sorry, Councillor Desmond.
Yeah, you've just picked up exactly what I was going to refer to. I'm a little concerned, and I don't want to sound rude, but I'm a little concerned at what I seem to be a rather complacent response there from you, Tracy. And I haven't heard risks being referred to as events before. That is really quite an interesting leap of logic. But the financial stability is one that simply can't be considered to be reducing. It's illogical. And when you take into account economic shocks, such as Brexit, the national debt, which at some point is going to have to be paid for, and we're going to have to contribute to it, it does say to me that there has to be some particular statement of risk that covers the issue about our financial stability as a high level issue and link it to leadership within the council to ensure that monitoring, preparedness and awareness, not complacency, is absolutely at the core of how we respond to what we expect to be a pretty difficult 2 to 3 years from now. Do you agree with any of that?
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. I recognise that this is one of the most difficult periods of that from a financial perspective that we've probably ever had in local government. So that is what I recognise. So it is my colleagues' responsibility to respond to what we've got in front of us, and I believe that from a Cornwall Council perspective and financial sustainability, that we are able to live within our means, but it requires us to be able to put in place plans to reduce the amount of money that we're spending. So, so in terms of financial sustainability, it is about the money that we're spending, but it's also about the money that we're going to get in the future in order to sustain what members want us to do. So having plans in place in order to keep looking at that, keep mitigating it, making sure that we're on top of the numbers that we've got in our bank accounts at any one time is key to reducing the risks on that, and that is what we do on a daily basis, and that is what I am doing on a daily basis. Do I agree that that it's really tough and that there's future economic shocks and it's going to be really hard? Absolutely. But as an organisation, it's my responsibility to make sure that we live within our means, and that's kind of how I work on the risk. And I believe that the plans that we've got in place for us as a council to live within our means are as good as we can have them.
Right, thank you, Tracy. I mean, for my part, I think the fact that we've got economic shocks marked up as 25, and we are as councillors seeing from Tracy and her team, moves towards keeping our arms around the numbers. We do get some comfort from it. As Tracy said, there's a lot more bad stuff out there, and we don't even know where we are right now. I have a couple of comments on this. On page 105 on the economic shocks, there's a line about mitigations currently documented, and it says create Cornwall Council Economic Growth Investment Fund. Now I've asked questions about this, and apparently this is some new thing coming down the pipe. But Tracy, can you tell us anything about this? In particular, how much and where will the scrutiny be?
Yeah, so this is linked to the new Shared Prosperity Fund. So this is the new mechanism by which the government is going to fund infrastructure investment in local areas. As yet, we haven't seen anything. it will require us to change the nature of the way that we do investment. So I think that there'll be quite a lot of scrutiny. I don't know the answer to your specific question, David, about how we're going to do that, but it's quite a big thing, and it's going to be quite a big change in the way that all of this is governed. So I would expect there to be a significant amount of scrutiny on that.
My only comment would be, I hope the control over it stays within the council and not some outside body or whatever else.
I think we're going to be the accountable body, and that's why it becomes complicated. But I think that we are going to retain accountability.
Right. Good. Can I raise? Sorry.
Can I just say something? A quick follow-up question on that point you raised, and that is procurement, the policy on procurement, finally going to come out where we give more support to the prosperity of Cornwall through giving greater opportunity to local businesses, particularly if the initiative is to spend the money in the community rather than the current procurement arrangement, which is biased against local businesses?
Councillor Desmond, there is a task and finish piece of work through the CAS overview and scrutiny, which is dealing with that strategy. So I would hope to see that shortly.
Right. Sorry, can I go on to the point I was trying to make? I think, Tracy, it's a question for you. I am questioning, because we've had 3 issues today. We've had the pensions issue. We've had the issue on debt management and information systems, etc., all of which are in the end the system not doing its job properly. And I wonder whether we haven't got a new, quite separate strategic risk, which is, and I'm trying to pick my words gently, and I'm going to fail here, which is managers failing to take responsibility and manage and follow standard operating procedures. You referred to it yourself, but I actually wonder whether we shouldn't be categorising this as a strategic risk. We've had 3 separate things on this in this audit committee here.
So so the risk of management failure in management oversight.
Yes.
I'm quite happy to go away and have a think about what that is. I don't disagree with you actually, but let me go away and have a think about how we couch that in terms of a strategic risk.
Okay, I don't know whether we. Okay, any other comments on this agenda item? Right, here's somebody shouting in the background.
David,
yeah.
That point you just made, and Tracy's undertaking to think about that, could that be put into the motion that there should be a further strategic, there should be another risk item, and that's to be assessed? I don't know how you word it, but I just wonder if you want to encapsulate that very important.
Can I think about that while Councillor Biscoe has his hand up with the question?
Sorry, Chairman, if I may, 2 points. The first one is around the thing about this endowment fund that you've just been discussing. The really important thing for Cornwall Council to be pushing back at the government on as they look to setting this up is that anything that they set up which is going to be a mechanism for promoting economic development has to operate on the basis that it is able to undertake long-term investments. If it's tied to 3-year funding cycles, 5-year political cycles, or any other cycle come to that, then actually what we do is reduce the ability of meaningful investment to be made in things that will actually develop meaningful economic change. And I think that's right, and that's the lesson that we have learned from operating within the 7-year policy cycle of the European Union over the last 20 or 30 years, that cycle has enabled us to make strong investments in long-term structural change, which is really important. I just wanted to refer, if I may, to the risk about technology, which is I can't anyway, it's on page 102, which talks about
we come to rely on technology to such an extent it increases the risk of a cyber attack. I would just like to say I do think that it also increases the risk that we end up marginalising already marginalised people. And if a local authority is there for anything, it is there to make sure that people within their area of operation are able to access the services, able to do so on a fair, equitable and free basis. It seems to me that is as great a risk as cyber attack. And I would just like to ask Tracy if she feels that risk of failure to get to those very marginalised people is actually something that is adequately expressed within the risk register in general.
Tracy?
So it's that's a matter of service delivery risk, and it is certainly something that we talk a lot about when we are thinking about how we redesign services and the design of services anyway. I think it is absolutely a risk. I don't think it's a strategic risk, because it's one that we are managing from on a service by service basis. But I do agree that we need to spend more time thinking about how we ensure that people aren't excluded from accessing services, and be more explicit about that. But it's a service delivery risk. Again, can I take that one away and work with Zoe to see whether or not that we express that well enough in some of our other, because these are the strategic risks. We have many other risks that we are also managing.
Right, thank you. So
I look forward to the outcome of working with Zoe.
Yeah, so Zoe, you've got your hand up, but there's Councillor Kenny. Do you want to go last, Zoe, in case there's something else relevant?
Yeah, I was looking at the risk tension across priorities, and I'm wondering whether that risk you've raised, David, would actually fit into there rather than make a new strategic risk. It's probably one of the issues that needs to go in, and also possibly Bert's as well, in the sense that what are our priorities? And personally, I think our greatest risk is the lack of income we might get if people can't pay their council tax. So I'm not sure where that one comes in. We talk about COVID risks without actually specifying what they are.
I don't think my worry comes in there. I think what Tracy was saying about Bert's concern, which I wholeheartedly echo, the number of people who either don't have access to the internet or have it but really don't know what they're doing, which probably includes me, is not a small number, and we mustn't miss those. So Zoe, did you want to comment before we move on?
Yeah, I just think I want to reiterate that these are the 7 strategic risks. We've also gone through a process of identifying 4 COVID strategic risks, which we'll update you with in January, but are essentially around finance, economy, health and communities, which some of these other sort of risks that you've been talking about may well sort of fit under when those mitigations are worked up. And also sitting under these strategic risks, corporately, service directors, heads of service, strategic directors have identified their sort of business critical and operational risks. So there's about 70 odd risks that have all been put onto the system. They have been scored in accordance with our risk management framework. We have visibility of those across the piece that are being managed at a kind of service delivery level within those services, and progress reported on in terms of those highest scoring risks. So there's quite a lot of risk architecture and frameworks which we're working to embed within those services, where those particular officers are best placed to manage those risks on a daily, a weekly, kind of monthly basis. So the list you're seeing is by no means exhaustive, but they are deemed to be at the moment the council's big 7 kind of strategic risks, aligned extremely closely to the council's business plan.
Okay, thank you. So I think if nobody else got any comment, I'm questioning in my mind whether we want to change the recommendation just to add something along the lines of and request the section 151 officer to consider, and Tracy, you actually had some better words than me, to consider whether the way we implement standard operating procedures isn't good enough. That's a rotten way of putting it.
It's the management oversight of business operations.
Sorry, can we try and write it down?
And that's linked to and understanding management responsibility for ensuring that procedures are.
I can't write that quickly. And request the 151 officer what?
To consider a new strategic risk of whether management oversight of operating procedures is adequate, or something like that.
Yep. Did you get that, Helen?
Yes,
Sorry.
Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Kenny, you put your hand up. Was that to propose it?
I'm not entirely. I mean, I won't vote again. I would probably abstain on that because I'm not entirely happy that what you're talking about is actually a strategic risk. I think it may fit in to one of the other risks. So as written, you're saying we're demanding another strategic risk, whereas I think on a review, we might be able to include it in one of the others. Right. So I'm not prepared to demand another strategic risk, so I will not be voting for that.
No, so just to be clear on the wording, we were requesting Tracy to consider it. And I'm raising it, Joanna, because it seems to me it's come up on three different things today. Which just makes
indeed, but the actual risk is very low. The actual risk was included very low amounts. I appreciate that that's happening, and it could be a symptom of a problem throughout the organisation.
That's the point.
I don't think it's. I don't think we have the proof that it is, and I don't consider what we've identified so far as strategic risk.
I second the motion.
A view, Chairman, with which Mrs. Kenny's view, with which I agree.
Any other comments, or do we want to go to the vote on this? I'm quite happy to listen to comments. Let's just okay. Well, look, and I need some help here on the technical way we do this. On the way we do this, Helen. Can we propose the recommendation as amended? And if we don't, and if that's voted down, we go back to the original recommendation. Is that the way to do it?
Yes, please.
So, okay, the recommendation as amended in full is that the committee notes the progress being made by management to mitigate the council's strategic risks and the progress made with embedding risk management at the council, and requests the section 151 officer to consider a new strategic risk or whether management oversight of operational procedures is sufficient. So I will propose that from the chair. I think Councillor Desmond was seconding. So we can go to the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Harris.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Biscoe.
Against.
Councillor Desmond.
For.
Councillor Edgerton.
For.
Councillor Ekinsmith.
Against.
Councillor Jordan.
For.
Councillor Kenny.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor LeBroy.
Against.
And Councillor Wood. Oh, Councillor Wood has left, hasn't he? So, Chairman, we have 4 votes for and 4 votes against.
I have a casting vote, and I will cast my vote in the way I voted for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we can move on. Agenda item 8 I think, is Commander's programme update, for which, have we got Mrs. Charlesworth May here?
Yes, I've arrived, Councillor Harris.
Helen, do you want to do 8 and 9 as one item, because they're pretty related?
That would be really helpful. Yes, and I'm going to do a really simple introduction. So as you will see from the reports, there are a number of actions that have been completed, but equally there are a number of actions that have not been completed. In reality, this is primarily because we've diverted significant resource to dealing with the pandemic over the past 6 to 8 months. And although there was a pause as we moved into a recovery phase for adults, there has been a high level of additional activity throughout the period, actually since March this year. However, I can assure you that on the Commander's report, I can assure you that we are continuing to work on the based approach to social work, which is the programme was all about. Continue to be diverted into other paid for social care services. And that was a key deliverable of the project. We have seen an increase in the number of domiciliary care packages. At the same time, we're seeing a reduction in the number of bed-based packages of care. Those two things are related. And what that indicates is that we are moving towards a lower level of intervention with people rather than a high level of intervention with people. We have about 1,000 people who are currently being supported by colleagues in the voluntary sector, which is a new intervention since we introduced Commonwealth last year. So that's 1,000 people that would otherwise have been in care or receiving no form of support at all. We are due to have another audit, obviously, because Audit are planning to come back. And prior to that, we will be talking to our colleagues in internal audit about the recommendations that were in the original report. And the reason for that is so much change has happened over the past 6 to 8 months that we will want to look at those recommendations in the first instance and decide whether they're still appropriate, and think about how that takes us into the next stage of audit of these programmes. In relation to the business process audit, clearly we are making progress with some of those really key elements around income, financial assessments, debt control, and we will conclude the consultation on our charging policy at the end of this calendar year, and plan to bring forward arrangements for a new policy from the beginning of April next year, based on whatever outcome we get from that consultation process. I hope that's helpful. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions, please. Do you have any questions? So a sudden list of them. Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Chairman. I note on page 109 at the bottom, it says the Directorate actions are partially achieved. The current performance is 63 mid, 73 west and east 5. Yet it says this is a reporting error. Why haven't we been informed what the reporting error was? It makes it look sorry.
Sorry, I'm happy to come in. So at the point of signing off the report, we were doing the investigation. We didn't know what it was, but I can give you an update on that now. So at the beginning of the pandemic, because staff were working from home rather than in the office, that had quite a profound impact on the way in which we were able to do business. So we stood down the formal meetings that we used to operate on a weekly basis, where people came together. However, we continued with informal conversations between social work staff off-site throughout the process. What happened in the East is that those case progression meetings, those informal case progression meetings, weren't recorded on the system because they weren't deemed to be formal meetings. We've gone back in and we've looked at the work, the outcomes on the individual cases, and what I can say to you, as of the 20th of October, the reporting figure was at 55%. That was because we'd looked at the cases and we had gone back into the system and recorded those formally on the system. We're continuing to do that, and by the end of the month I expect that reporting and recording to be more in line with our target. But what I can absolutely assure you of is that the impact on individuals and the outcomes those individuals are achieving has not been affected as a result of this.
Thank you. I do have a second question. I don't know if it's right on this agenda item or the next agenda item, but at any one time in hospitals, there are approximately 100 people taking up bed space because a care package hasn't been sorted out for them. We're going to need those bed spaces very soon if this COVID increases to any extent. What is Cornwall Council doing to work with the NHS to clear these beds?
So that's not directly related to this, and I'm very happy to talk about it if the chair is okay with that.
If you can briefly, I think we need to be careful in this meeting to stick with what's in our agenda, but I think that's a very fair question.
So, so we have been under very, very significant pressure over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and this week in particular. But just to give you a bit of context, because it's not quite as straightforward as it appears, is that there has been a bed reduction in RCHT of 50 beds because of social distancing. So those beds are permanently not available any longer. And in the last week, there has been a reduction of 200 beds in UHP, specifically related to the need for social distancing because of the increase in incidence of COVID in Plymouth and on the peninsula. So just to give you a bit of context for the position we find ourselves in at the moment. The second important piece of information is that since March, we have actually increased domiciliary care availability by 21%. That is a very, very significant increase in the number of domiciliary care hours available to people across Cornwall for care. Now, what we are seeing at the moment is the consequence of a backlog in activity as a result of the lockdown. So during the lockdown, we stopped seeing people coming into adult social care and we stopped seeing people coming into our hospitals. In the last 2 months, we've seen that that trend reversed. We're seeing a very significant increase in the number of people coming to adult social care and a very significant increase in the people coming into our hospitals. And those people are much more complex than would have been the case this time last year. So the people at the front door of the hospital are very, very poorly, and the people in need of adult social care have very significant levels of complexity that we weren't seeing previously. So the council and the hospital are absolutely working together. I have been on 12 meetings this week working out what we can do to support the hospitals in moving people through the hospital. But what I would say to you is we have an equal number of people in the community that we are responsible as a local authority who are not able to access care because we are prioritising people coming out of hospital rather than people who are already at home. So the assurance I can give you is that we are working alongside our colleagues in health to the absolute best of our ability, and we are doing everything we can as a health and care system to support the hospitals. However, I expect the next 2 months to probably be some of the most difficult that we will have seen in Cornwall. Certainly since I arrived, not because of COVID, but it will to the level of complexity we are now seeing amongst our population.
Thank you for that, Helen.
I'm not sure thank you is the right word, actually.
No, it isn't really thank you, but what I can do, because I know councillors are very worried about this more generally, what I suggest is that we will draft a briefing for councillors which we'll send out to everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Leroy.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Helen. I've got several contacts who actually work within the adult social care department in Cornwall Council, probably all of them in the east, interestingly. They've all told me anecdotally that their experiences with Newton Europe has been one of almost despair, because they feel that all the resources and activities that they once delivered with pride are being chopped down to the minimum. I remember once somebody talking to me about the principle of reverse engineering, product wise, where until the product is no longer viable, and then you build it back up half a step. And I just feel that that's probably what we appear to have gone through with this project, and that's what my heart tells me, and it's what the people that I know that work within your department appear to be telling me. And it feels to me that morale is also fairly low within those people, especially amongst people who are mature and are managers, and are just seeing that the resources have been cut so harshly, and their ability to deliver with pride a service that they once did appears to have been restricted very heavily. I've also had a personal experience in the last couple of weeks, actually, of trying to help somebody with adult social care, and it has been an absolute nightmare. Very difficult to get anywhere with it at all. And I'm harking back to a question which David Harris put earlier in this meeting to a slightly different scenario. Helen, do you actually believe that your department is sufficiently resourced to deliver a respectable and proper and fit for purpose service?
So there is no director of adult social care anywhere in the country who is going to answer yes to that question. Adult social care, we need a national settlement for adult social care that puts it on a par with the NHS if we are to deliver with the sort of pride and consistency that you are suggesting. It is I think we need to reflect on the fact that the Newton Europe project had two key aims. The first was to bring a consistency across Cornwall that we weren't seeing, and was based on the strengths-based approach to care. But it was also intended to deliver very, very significant cashable savings for the council. And actually the reason we have this report in the audit committee is because internal auditors weren't content that we had delivered the scale of saving that had perhaps been anticipated. Now we have delivered over £13 million worth of savings as a result of the work that we have done. The ambition was to deliver £23 million worth of savings as a result of this work. It is inevitable in those circumstances that some people, some of our staff, will feel that they are no longer able to do the things they were able to do in the past. There is clearly a very different sense around the Comenith project in the east to that we had in the mid and the west. And again, you may recall from the internal audit report that one of their concerns was it wasn't as embedded in the east as it was in the mid and the west. I wouldn't call this reverse engineering, but what we did do was look at what was working, what wasn't working, and what was the most efficient way of doing it. And one of the key things we identified, I use this as an example, is that people would phone us, 80% of those people would get referred on for an assessment. Of those people who were getting an assessment for care, fewer than 50% were receiving a service. What has happened as a result of the Kameneth project is that we're seeing much fewer people referred for an assessment, but we're seeing in excess of 80% of those people receiving an assessment receiving a service. So it was about looking at the data and working out how you make the most efficient intervention possible in the process. That was the purpose of it, and I think that is what we have achieved. But without a doubt, there are some people who have not felt that this is a way in which they want to work. I would also add that you are right, morale at the moment is very low, and that is a direct consequence of the amount of the last 6 to 7 months, actually. People really rose to the challenge at the beginning of the pandemic, but 8 months on, still not able to have full access to their colleagues on a routine basis, a sense I had as much as anybody else that by now life would feel more normal. That has had a very profound effect on our workforce. And as we go into winter, one of the key things that we need to address, I need to address over the next 3 months, is how we bolster the well-being of the adult social care workforce during this period.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Helen. That's great, and I understand where you are and the challenges that you face. I don't really want you to come back on this, but just 2 observations. But one of which is that given our proposed optional redundancy programme, I worry that we are likely or susceptible to losing some very valuable people that work within our organisation, people that have taken years to amass knowledge and practice skills at what they do. And I think we need to be observant of that and make sure we don't lose that level of quality. Just to ask the question generally, I really expect to respond maybe
I think our risk, it goes back to the tensions strategic risk. So the reason why we've got that tensions strategic risk is because there is a real tension with trying to deliver everything that the council needs to deliver from a statutory perspective, and what it wants to deliver from a place shaping and a preventative perspective, and that is the strategic risk, actually, I think, and the conversations that you're having now and that Helen's just has just raised are the conversations that we have when we're discussing that tensions risk.
I think.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
If I can just comment on that, the other thing is your tensions across priorities. Your current score is only 8. But if we're saying that adult social care is within this, I would venture, I think Councillor De Bruyne would almost certainly agree with me, that it should be coming out at a higher number than 8. That's one for you to consider. Sorry, moving on. Councillor Biscoe first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back, firstly, good afternoon, Helen. I hope you're well. Going back to your comments at the beginning of this discussion, you referred to, I think, something in the region of 1,000 tasks being undertaken by our colleagues in the voluntary sector. And I'm just wondering if in engaging with the voluntary sector, I'd just be interested to know if we are procuring their services on the basis of paying, ensuring that the people who are doing the work are getting paid at general levels as opposed to what you might say voluntary sector levels, and that the contracts themselves are being let on the basis that there are adequate resources available to both deliver and to monitor and to ensure that the organisation that sits underneath the contract delivery is actually robust. So in other words, are we paying a fair price for the voluntary sector?
So that's a really interesting question. I think we are. We on the adult social care side, and this is something that the council is trying generally, but which we're adults, is that procure voluntary sector that asks the voluntary organisations to compete against one another. We've shifted to an approach where we're trying to encourage our voluntary sector organisations to collaborate so that they are able to share resources that help to administer things well, that they are able to share the people who volunteer so that people are working at things that best suit them and in places that best suit them. And that we draw on the strengths of the different organisations that are working with. So we encourage collaboration. Clearly, volunteers don't get paid beyond being paid expenses, etc., etc. So we're not in the realms of ensuring that everybody who is volunteering and supporting is on the minimum wage, as an example, but what we are doing is ensuring that there is an infrastructure that allows our voluntary organisations to operate safely, and we need to be assured of that, because we of course are asking them to do things that we otherwise would do for ourselves.
So if I may come back, Chairman, in my experience of the voluntary sector, we refer to the voluntary sector mainly as a way of describing organisations that share a form of governance. So they're trusts and trustees and all that sort of stuff, or in these days community investment companies and so on, community interest companies. And there are a great many people who actually earn their living within the voluntary sector. Now, I assume that if we are asking voluntary sector bodies to undertake the delivery of social care, that in order to have the degree of accountability that we need, and in order to make sure that we've got the skill levels that we need, that we would be expecting those voluntary sector bodies to be employing people. And I mean, I find it difficult to understand how we could possibly be offering packages of care to people in need on the basis of the people who are providing it being volunteers. I can see that some aspects of it could be voluntary, but I could see that some aspects of it need to be paid and professionally delivered. And I'm just interested in the people who work in the voluntary sector as opposed to the actual volunteers, and asking if you're ensuring that those people who are doing the equivalent tasks of people in the private sector are actually receiving what I would call competitive wages.
So absolutely. So I think, so I'm sorry, I think I've probably misled you. So let's be really clear that paid employees of voluntary organisations are earning every bit as much as they would if they were working for any other private sector organisation. And where we have contracted for a paid registered service that happens to be delivered by the voluntary sector, then that is paid for and contracted for on the same basis as we would with any other provider. The sorts of things I'm talking about that are being delivered through tiers are things like collecting medicines, doing a bit of shopping, transporting people. They are not it is absolutely not personal care or anything registered organisation.
That's right, thank you. That is very reassuring.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Desmond.
Yeah, hi. First of all, let me say I appreciate what you do, Helen. Yours must be one of the most difficult directorates to manage. Adult social care is such an important issue in communities. It has so many emotional issues that go with it. So I salute you and what your team does. My question, though, is very simple. Are you in a position yet to be preparing a working relationship with the new adult care contract through MEARS?
So I'm going to start by saying.
Sorry, Helen, can I interrupt? Councillor Desmond, I'm going to be obnoxious here. This is not an adult scrutiny meeting, and if it was an adult scrutiny meeting, that would be a fair question. This is an audit meeting, and I think we should stick, particularly with Helen as busy as she is, with what's on this agenda. So I'm going to be blunt and rule you out of order here. Sorry.
If you think it's, yeah, I was just looking at whether some of the pressures that are being applied and being experienced at the moment might be relieved through consultations with the MEARS adult social care package.
I think it's a question for a different meeting. I think I'm now going to slightly touch on it anyway, Councillor Desmond.
Okay.
One question I've got, Helen, or an observation really, is I wonder how many of, we've got 2 reports in here from you, which are, good reports. When I look at adult scrutiny, I don't see something like these reports going there and being looked at. And in particular, the one I'm really querying is, we're on agenda item 9 now, the new CREPA Warbar, Delivering a Better Care Programme, that went through Cabinet in September, but I can't see it ever went through adult scrutiny.
So no, it didn't go through adult scrutiny at that point, but there are papers lined up for adult scrutiny that will look at the detail of that as that develops.
Okay, thank you. I just very slightly that adult scrutiny, because it has so much to look at. I mean, there are areas, and that's why I was slightly rude to Councillor Desmond in pushing him back, that they they almost miss because there's so much to look at.
So, I mean, what I will say about the contract to MEARS for extra care is that had we not had scrutiny suspended because of the pandemic, that would absolutely have gone to scrutiny before it went to Cabinet. It was timetabled to do that. And there had actually been a number, so there had been, before it went out to tender, the outline proposal for that contract went to scrutiny, probably the end of 2018, that sort of time frame. So that was very, very unusual. But you're right, the adult scrutiny meeting does have a very broad remit because it is not just about adult social care, it is about the totality of health and care. And we do try and target our reports on those areas where we think it will have the biggest impact.
Okay, that's something for another meeting to discuss. If there are no other points, I don't know whether we can take the recommendations on agenda items 8 and 9 together. Helen, can we do that?
Yep, no, that's absolutely fine. Oh, sorry, you're not talking to me.
Helen, you can have whichever job you want. I think Helen Snell's will be easier. So, agenda item number 8, the Audit Committee note the final internal report into the Gwynedd programme issued in May 2020, which was presented at 30th of June 2020 Audit Committee meeting. And 2, that the Audit Committee note the progress in relation to the recommendations arising from that report. And agenda item number 9, that the Audit Committee note the final internal audit report into the adult social care modernisation business processes in March 2020, and 2, that the Audit Committee note the progress in relation to the recommendations arising from that report. Can I have a proposer, please?
I'll propose both, Chairman.
Councillor Jordan, thank you. And the seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Desmond, thank you. Helen? Snell?
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so we're voting on both together, and hopefully everybody's votes will be the same for both. If they're not, if you can let me know. So item 8 and 9, Councillor Harris.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Biscoe.
4 and 4.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond.
Double 4.
Thank you. Councillor Edgerton.
Yep, 4 and 4.
Thank you. Councillor Ecclesmith. Councillor Ecclesmith. Okay, we'll come back to Councillor Ecclesmith. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, 4 and 4.
Thank you. And Councillor Kenny.
4 both.
Thank you. And Councillor LeBroy.
4 both.
Thank you. Councillor Ecclesmith. Councillor Ecclesmith, are you there to vote? Yes, Councillor Ecclesmith seems to be having problems with his microphone. However, I can confirm that I can see him and he is nodding for both items. Yeah. Thank you. That's carried, Councillor Harris.
If I could stop laughing at Councillor Ecclesmith's gesticulation, we'd be all right. Okay, we've got 2 agenda items left, and I think we can do both these straight through now. Agenda item number 10, financial sustainability and budget planning update. Tracy Langley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I need to get onto a different page in order to do this. You will see in front of you that we are updating the reports that you have seen previously on financial sustainability and budget planning, and we've already spoken a little bit about where we are at the moment, which is quite a lot of uncertainty, but trying to manage the current situation with that uncertainty as best we can. But also to put together a medium-term financial plan and a budget strategy for 21-22 onwards, which is quite hard actually. So the Audit Committee in January received an exception report on financial sustainability, which gave limited assurance that there were inadequate arrangements in place to deliver the annual savings targets. And I know that pre my coming to the organisation, there had been some criticism about the council's ability to be able to deliver on the savings plans that it had put in place. Regardless of that, there were a medium-term financial plan and a budget which was approved in February of this year in 2020. And then we went into lockdown and we had COVID. So our ability again to put the resources towards making this that were in the medium-term financial plan agreed in February was made much harder. And Helen outlined some of the difficulties that her service has been having with delivering on those. We've already talked about the significant financial impacts that there have been with regards to our planning, and the government have been giving many council which has been unring-fenced, but also many and much ring-fenced money that's being passported to our community in different ways. So we have been taking mitigating actions in terms of one-off activities this year, and there was a budget report that went to the September Cabinet, which outlined our in-year mechanisms for making sure that we weren't going to overspend towards the end of the year. And that was in order to ensure that we were resilient going into the next financial year, we knew was going to be even more difficult. We also have made many statements about the fact that we could not use the previous methods for making savings and agreeing savings in services, because firstly they weren't working. We weren't delivering on those individual service savings as we should have been doing. And actually, we need a much more proactive and strategic way of delivering cross-council savings in cross-council change. So what had been happening previously is that savings were being made at service level on service budgets, but that didn't allow us then to look more strategically at cross-cutting and larger amounts of savings that would have a bigger impact. So we've introduced the idea of using an outcomes-based budgeting process in order to realign our resources for the whole council using a new target operating model. Now we're working on that, and you will all have heard me talk previously about our transformation programme, which is linked directly to our outcomes and the delivery of savings. I think in terms of the Q1 position at 2.6 here, you will see there that with all of the mitigations that we were taking in year, and that was essentially putting the brakes on spending that we didn't need to have, but at the same time trying to recognise all of the bits of different money that were coming in from the government in terms of grants. We were forecasting a 6.3 million overspend as of that Q1 position. We also put more mitigations in place to ensure that we at the end of this financial year, so 2021, we're in a position where we weren't having to draw from reserves because of an overspend position, and we put procedures in place to ensure that everybody underspent. Those are largely around sort of recruitment freezes in year, which we've just approved, and you will also know that we have a voluntary redundancy process in place at the moment, which will impact mostly in next year, because the loss of 200 posts will have an impact more next year. But actually, we will see many of those people going before the end of next March, and we will make some in-year saving off the back of that. I think that's all I really wanted to say, Chair, but more than happy to take any queries or questions about the financial position. But as I said earlier, in terms of the risks that we're carrying, the risks are great, but I believe that we've got a good plan in place to contain those, certainly in year, understanding that of course there are uncertainties next year.
Thank you. And of course, in terms of the budgets, all the budgets are going through individual scrutiny committees as well. But I've got Councillor Edgerton, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I must admit, I'm sorry, Tracy, I'm not persuaded that this transformation board is going to solve all the problems. You know, we talk about stopping salami slicing, which is the way we've always done it. So, OK, let's throw everything up in the air, go back to grassroots and transform the whole council, and everybody will work together. We'll all have a consensus and it'll all be hunky-dory, and it will happen in 2022. Well, I won't be around then. So all I can say is good luck to you. If you can pull it off, you know, good, but I'm not holding my breath, sorry.
Can I say that the transformation programme is a 4-year programme, And we will spend the next year, and the details are in the September report. We will spend the next year right sizing the budget and making sure that we are ready to make the redesign work that we need to do in years 2, 3 and 4. And that is fundamentally about spending less in the council, certainly on the amount of contracts that we've got and the number of people that we employ. We have to be a smaller organisation by at least 58 million over those 4 years, unless the government's going to give us a load of new money that we don't know about, which they might.
Right, thank you. Anybody else, or can we go to the recommendation?
Quick question, please, Chairman.
Yes.
At 2.5, you talk about the council has received substantial support from the government to cover the costs associated with directly supporting the Cornwall during the pandemic, and you indicate that it doesn't quite cover all the expenditure that we've incurred. Have you accounted for every package item of contribution from government in that statement? Do you know what the value is? What's the total aggregate value of what the contributions have been from government over and above the normal financial profile for the council?
Councillor, I don't have it off the top of my head, but there are grants coming in every week, but they're not all for us and they're not all ring fenced. So most of that money, and it is somewhere near 380 million, has gone out to the community in terms of business grants, in terms of food support grants and various other. But we are, Councillor, putting that together. And if you remember, originally a couple of months ago, I'd made some statements about what that looked like. And if you remember, that was the 74 million that it was costing us as a council, not as a community. So I'm updating those statistics for you so that I can update that for you. And what we will try and do there is to give you some information about the whole of the grants that are being given to the community. But you have to remember that they don't all come through us. Some of them have gone into the NHS, some of them have gone into directly into the community. So all we can do really is do our best to understand how much has come into the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Biscoe.
Tracy, I wonder if I could just ask you, coming back to the table at 2.6 and the outturn by directorate, I note that the biggest variance, I think, is in economy, growth and development, and that is okay. But I am very anxious about two things. The first one is that we think about infrastructure and the need that we're going to have for infrastructure to be able to support the economic revival, which is absolutely necessary in order to get ourselves to a position where the revenue that is being generated for the public purse through economic activity and the taxation that occurs as a result is going to be sufficient to meet future challenges. And in reading about the transformation plan, I'm anxious that the council is looking to itself and it's kind of looking in. And actually, this is almost the same question in a sense as asking you about the one I asked you earlier on. In a sense, it needs to be looking out and thinking about what's going to be needed and how it's going to engage with those pressures and those initiatives and opportunities that occur around it. Because if we leave ourselves in a position where everything that we do is about the services that we provide, we leave ourselves apart from and therefore not able to engage with and therefore remove a degree of energy from developments that are able to occur economically, which may be a response to climate change, there may be a response to COVID or whatever, but we need to be in there. Now I see that variance in economic growth, and I figure that a variance of that scale on an annual budget is likely to mean that there's going to be a demand for savings in that directorate in order to be able to balance that out. What I'm anxious about is that in doing that, we don't lose sight of the need to engage in innovation and development in the economy and the need to sustain and evolve our infrastructure.
Right. Sorry, Tracy, before
Yeah,
you
just
answer.
quickly. So thank you,
Tracy,
Councillor Biscoe.
Sorry, just before you answer. Councillor Biscoe, I think 3/4 of that question was much better directed to economic development scrutiny than this one. So Tracy, if you can just answer shortly.
So the amount of overspend that you can see there in EGD relates to loss of parking income. It's covered by the COVID grant, and one would hope that our parking comes back.
So in that case, because I noticed that further along the line, you've got a column which is COVID pressures, millions.
Yeah.
And that means that from that I read that we've had 19 million in against the 18 million variance. Is that what I should read that column as?
Yes, in effect, what we're doing is we have a mechanism by which we put onto a return to the government the amount of lost income and cost of COVID, and that goes into the government once a month or so, and we get slugs of money against that. And what we're saying is that the amount of money that it's costing us has not been completely covered by the COVID grant that we've had in.
Okay, all right. I was walking up my garden path last night, stood on a slug.
So Tracy, just very quickly on that point, does that 32.8 million figure in there include the most recent 6.5 million they announced?
No, because this is only the Q1 position. We're just about to present the Q2 position.
Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else, we can go to the recommendation on this one, which is very straightforward. And the recommendation is the committee notes the current position relating to the financial sustainability of the council and the budgetary planning for 2020-21. May I have a proposer, please?
We shall move.
Thank you, Mr. Biscoe. Councillor Biscoe. And a seconder?
Okay, Philip again.
I think Councillor Kenny just got in there, Councillor Desmond.
Okay.
And the vote, Helen?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Harris.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Biscoe.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Desmond.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Edgerton.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ekin-Smith.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan.
4.
Councillor Kenny.
4.
And Councillor LeBroy.
4.
Thank
you, members. That's carried.
Thank you. And the final item on the agenda, and we will be done before lunch. Well done. Thank you. Oracle project update. Is Mark Reed with us?
Yes, I am, Chair.
In that case, if you'd like to lead off, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Just by way of introduction, I'm the new SRO for the Oracle project since the beginning of this month, when Richard Williams left the organisation. So, having fairly little involvement in the project prior to that, I've been on a pretty steep learning curve in the last 3 or 4 weeks. But the purpose of this report, as I understand it, is at your June meeting, you considered an audit opinion regarding the original Oracle business case, which goes back to 2017. And as the opinion was limited assurance and high risk about the validity of the business case, you requested an update on that within 6 months. So that's the primary purpose of this report. I've also taken the opportunity to provide a bit of a broader kind of project progress update, which is hopefully useful for the committee. So before I come to the 3 specific audit recommendations, general progress, as you're no doubt aware, the Oracle system went live on the 8th of April. Business case aside, that was a pretty significant achievement. We're one of the first local authorities now to fully implement the Oracle solution, and that was extra challenging, obviously, during the kind of early days of lockdown when most of the team were working from home. The final stage of the initial implementation was completed in September, when we went live with a further 33 external payrolls. So they're all in now. That's all done. It's still early days. Inevitably, with a system change of this size, there are still some teething issues which we're working through. But my kind of general summary is things are going well as you would expect them to do. The system is now fully live, and it's being well used across the organisation and by those external organisations. So the project itself is now starting to transition to kind of business as usual. And we're going to do that over the next 4 months leading to March 21. There are still some deliverables that the project will be delivering before it concludes. They're set out, I think, in your packs on pages 135 and 136. And that absolutely won't be the end of it. Post the formal project, there will absolutely remain a focus on driving out the maximum efficiency and making sure we make the most of the investment in the Oracle platform. So coming back to the three audit high priority findings, which are set out on pages 136 to 138 in your pack, which I think is section 2.7 in the report. Obviously, I can't really comment on the history here, but in terms of looking at the first audit recommendation or kind of identification, which related to the understatement of costs and the overstatement of benefits in the original business case. That's now had a full review, and the position has now been agreed with Tracy Langley as a Section 151 officer, with finance colleagues and with audit colleagues. So we now know absolutely where we are with the financials around the Oracle system, and those are being reported accordingly now through Tracy's budget in the CAS Directorate and coming through to members by way of the standard financial reporting. So that's all in place now. The second recommendation was about not being able to leverage the opportunities and efficiencies from the system relating again to the original business case. I think there's a couple of things on this for me. The first one is I think we need to recognise that it will take time to fully drive out the benefits that a change of this magnitude will deliver. It's not a case of just simply plugging it in and all the benefits kind of fall out immediately. This will take quite significant work on an ongoing basis. But whilst it's still relatively early days, we have set out benefits that have been delivered to date through the project, and also a number that are still planned by the project, and they're set out on page 137. And for me, as I've already said, kind of post the project, there will absolutely remain a focus on making sure we drive out the maximum benefits we can from the Oracle platform, and this will be a key enabler to the transformation program, which Tracy talks about in terms of optimising a lot of our internal processes that the council has. And the third recommendation that the audit review called out was general the poor financial management and reporting around the whole Oracle project. Again, I can't comment on the history, but what I can say is that having looked at this is now fully rectified. Again, myself and Tracy have looked at this. We know the financial position that's been agreed, and it is reported as such. So it's reported through Tracy's directorate. We're in the final throes of the project now. We are managing a 1.5 million overspend in this year's budget. That's corporately reported. That's where it is, and we're monitoring against that. But we are confident now that we've got those costs nailed down, and that includes the ongoing kind of operational costs as well that the system brings. So, and I think that the final thing I'll also say is it's kind of pleasing to note that Grant Thornton, in their IT audit that they concluded a few months ago, have also confirmed that there are no issues identified regarding controls around the new system implementation governance. So we've got that kind of external assurance from Grant Thornton as well, which is pleasing. So quite happy to take questions. Recommendation is the committee endorses the actions that we're taking, and also I think importantly note that the project is now transitioning to BAU over the next few months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny first.
Yeah, I totally accept what you're saying, and everything is now on track, but the initial recommendation was very harsh, that the cost more than you expected, and it hasn't actually achieved what you expected to go into the savings. I now understand from what you're saying that it has actually always on target to achieve the savings. Is that the case? And did it cost more than it should have done?
Well, it absolutely cost more than the original business case set out. Absolutely, there was a gross underestimation from what I've seen in terms of that original business case. In terms of the benefits, it's difficult to answer that yet because this will be an ongoing process of driving out benefits from the system. That will take time. So, you know, the business case called out a number of benefits, and we're absolutely focused on that, and we're going to have a good go at driving those out. But I can't give you assurance at the moment that we will be driving all of those benefits out. The only pleasing bit from my perspective on that is that there is no kind of budget line in the council's budget kind of predicated on delivering those savings specifically, other than, you know, as I've said, we see this as a big enabler in terms of the transformation programme that Tracy mentions. But that's the assurance I can provide you at the moment. I think you're on mute, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, it's a lesson for future big projects, IT projects that we get.
Absolutely.
To work, get the accuracy right.
Totally agree.
Okay, Councillor Desmond.
Yeah, interesting reading. A straightforward question. Do you have, or are you putting in place, an industry standard quality assurance system to monitor the efficiency and performance of the setup? I'm thinking in terms of perhaps something on the lines of BS 9001, that management system.
Yes, we are. I mean, we're working closely with colleagues in finance, audit and IT, looking at the ongoing kind of operation of the system and how we're monitoring its performance and driving out the efficiencies. So the answer is yes, and we're also working very closely with other local authorities who are implementing Oracle as well. There are a lot of authorities out there who are doing the same as us. There's a lot of cross kind of sharing and learning here in terms of information. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, we are having the right discussions and putting the right focus on the ongoing monitoring of performance.
Okay,
thank you.
Anybody else? I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned a GT audit report. Is there any reason this committee shouldn't see that report?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair. No, it was an IT audit that they did at the end of March, is my understanding. Whether that would come through to the committee as standard, I'm not aware, but I don't see why you shouldn't be able to see that.
I don't know whether Tracy or Helen. I mean, I remember in previous years we've had a report from PwC.
David, it might form part of their summary report at a next committee. So when that report is fully finalised, I'm not 100% sure if it's finalised yet, Mark. But once it is, then it will come through to committee. I'm not sure on the status.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Chair, can I just? Sorry, Chair, because I can't put my hand up. It will be summarised in the audit findings report, and there was a finding around super users, I think, and access, in which case we've had to adjust some of our testing because of that, but we can explain that a little bit more in our audit findings report.
Thank you. Right, that was question one. Mark, you said that the supposed or intended benefits, better word, sorry, from Oracle are set out in the original business case. So presumably somewhere somebody's got a map saying on one side intended benefits and they are ticking them off. Absolutely, yes. Right. Yep. And then my final question, looking at the risks, and it seems to, well, it's maybe my penultimate question. Risk of Oracle Cloud System knowledge being lost when consulting and contractors go away. Risk that we are unable to recruit to key business as usual posts. What are those risks? That seems pretty horrendous to me if it goes wrong. Yeah, so I mean the first risk around the knowledge share from consultants, so we're all over that now. So we are ensuring that there is appropriate knowledge share as people roll off of the project. You know, they're not kind of now leaving us high and dry. So our Cornwall Council team are kind of looking for the right word, but submerged in knowledge share from those people that are leaving the project. The second one around the kind of IT skills,
That's a bit of a broader kind of question, really, in terms of IT and challenges to recruit in the IT service at the moment. But it is a live discussion we're having with IT at the moment. There are a couple of Oracle-related posts that we need, and they are in the IT structure. And IT are actively out to recruit against those posts at the moment. Now that's all I can say at the moment in terms we are seeking to get those skills into the organisation. But that's kind of a broader question in terms of IT skills in its kind of broadest sense, and making sure we get those appropriate skills in our IT service.
And if I hear what you're saying, if I hear you properly, I think you're suggesting that recruiting to these posts is not easy.
Correct. It is a risk, which is why we call it out as one of the primary risks. It's not easy, for 2 or 3 reasons. Right.
So how do we monitor it?
How do you monitor it? How do I monitor it?
Good question. Sorry.
The other question is, who is monitoring it, and where's any reporting going?
So I'm monitoring this as the SRO. Formal reporting on that risk goes through the Oracle board. So we've got a formal Oracle board which goes in, which is in place, and as it's a strategic and critical project. That also gets reported up to the corporate director team and through to cabinet, etc., as part of the performance reporting. But in terms of the closest monitoring, I do that as the SRO through the Oracle board. Obviously, I'm having a number of conversations outside of the board with the head of IT, etc., to try and get a grip on it.
Have we still got an internal involvement here now? Have we stopped, Holly?
Sorry, just trying to turn it all back on. Yeah, so we undertake follow-up work around all the agreed management actions, and we'll continue to pay a close attention to the Oracle project.
Yeah, and we've got a member of Holly's team who sits on the Oracle board as well.
Thank you. I think that actually is the real piece of comfort that you just. I mean, beyond everything else, the fact that internal audit are in there.
Yes, they are.
Is the. Okay, I mean, I just hope that I put a slide up, say listing our top 10 spends by suppliers, and listing a law firm at £2 million. And when we queried it, we were told, well, that's how the figures come off Oracle. And in fact, the spend was £10,000 with the lawyers, and the rest of it was money paid for a property. But it had come off Oracle like that, and somebody just put it up there as being a fact.
Mm.
I hope that's somewhere within your areas you're looking at. I don't expect an answer.
Okay.
Quality assurance.
Thank you. Right, if there are no more questions, we can go to the resolution, which is that the committee receives this update, endorses the actions being taken by the SRO and project team to deliver the project, and to note that the project is now transitioning to be part of the council's business as usual process. And there's an apostrophe missed off the resolution, but I'll forgive you. Can we have a proposer, please?
I'll propose, Chairman.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll do it again.
Councillor Desmond, thank you. Helen, to the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Harris.
4.
Councillor Biscoe.
4, thank you.
Councillor Desmond.
4.
Councillor Edgerton.
4.
Councillor Ackensmith.
4.
Councillor Jordan.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
4.
And Councillor LeBroy.
4.
That's carried.
Thank you. Agenda item 12. Any other business the chairman considers to be of urgency? No. In which case,
Mike's got his hand up there, David.
Sorry?
Mike Ethon Gibbons has got his hand up.
We can. Well, do you want to say something, Mr. Ethon Gibbons? Councillor Ethon Gibbons, your hand is up.
It is up, yeah. Just to compliment you on keeping to time. It's only just gone 1. A very constructive meeting, I thought, this morning. Just a couple of observations from me. when you added the additional risk to consider management oversight of business operations, I would argue that's an operational risk rather than a strategic one, but nonetheless a very good discussion of risks. I think at times, from listening to some of your colleagues, there is probably some further training to ensure people do understand the difference of the role of the audit committee to that of the scrutiny committee. So those are just two brief observations from me, but those are discussed probably for another time. Otherwise, well done. I think we can all go to lunch.
Well, I'm most grateful for the lecture and the compliment. I'm not sure we need it. Right, okay, well, I have nothing of urgency to discuss, so the meeting's closed and we will meet again fairly shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you,
David. Cheers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon.